Morning, everybody. Let us take an indulgent moment to explain away an error that's already occurred. I sent out the wrong name for today's session. I sent out indulgence, but actually today's session is Winter Hot Springs. So bag number 1 says Winter Hot Springs. That's what we'll be talking about today. I apologize for the error. I sent everybody an email about 4 or 5 minutes ago, so it's fresh off the press. Thank you, Rob, for pointing that out. Appreciate that. So that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into Winter Hot Spring. This is a cliff tea. Cliff tea has one single definition. And by the way, welcome all the new people this morning who are on the broadcast. Always nice to have new people on the broadcast. And by the end of this broadcast, just in case people aren't clear yet, we'll have a very good definition of what cliff teas are and are not. We'll actually have some sense of how a cliff tea is processed, and we'll really have a good idea of brewing and brewing instructions and why it's important to follow these. All right, so the definition of cliff tea. Cliff teas are from the Wuyi Mountains. Where are the Wuyi Mountains again? The Wuyi Mountains are in Fujian province. That's southern China. It's a province which is on the Pacific Ocean. Going west from the Pacific Ocean, at the top or the northernmost part of the province is where the Wuyi Mountains are. This area is a World Heritage Site in China. So what does that mean? It's protected. It's protected in several different ways. First off, you can't have industry in the mountains. That's the first thing. Second off, there isn't a lot of infrastructure development in the mountains. So there's special attention paid not only to this area because of the cultural heritage, but also the biodiversity of the species of plants living in this area. So that's one of the reasons that this is a World Heritage Site. Beautiful site to visit. When you arrive there, the first thing that really comes to mind is, oh my gosh, the air is clean. It's really clean. And that water is beautiful. Am I in Yosemite? It's that type of feeling. And compared to some of the other World Heritage Sites in China, there isn't the crush of people. So this is the site, and these are the cliffs from where cliff tea comes from. Doesn't come from Taiwan, doesn't come from any other part of China. Cliff tea in Chinese, yancha, is a specific designation of this area. Not only is it a specific designation of this area, it's a specific designation of the process of doing Oolong tea in this area. Oolong tea was first invented sometimes, and by the way, let's talk about that for a second. Wulong tea. What is the meaning of that? Simply a process of doing the tea. This process of doing the tea started sometime in the late 1500s. And it started in these mountains, by the way. Later, it went south into southern Fujian, and they adopted it to their particular terroir. And really, I'm talking about cultural terroir as well as the physical terroir. So they do Wulong tea in a different way, a slightly different way, but the overall terroir is very different and the end result is very different. Taiwan, of course, does Wulong tea. So does Canton Province. So you have several places that do it, but it was invented in the Wuyi Mountains. And the Wuyi Mountains are the most famous for how they do this. And this cliff tea refers or is a designation of Wulong tea from this area. So we should start with that first, because occasionally people will try and convince you, oh yes, cliff tea comes from Taiwan. Answer would be no, not that designation. If they use the literal Chinese yan cha, no, it only comes from this area. So what's different about this area, aside from being a World Heritage Site? This area, especially where the teas are grown, that whole area is about 500 square kilometers. But the really intensely good part of that area is 7.7 square kilometers. It is a tiny, small area. And I'm talking relative to the total area, of course. And that's where the most famous of the cliff teas, the most costly of all the cliff teas comes from. And the reason for that is that the particular soil configuration is very special out there. Remember, here in the West, we're used to some degree, industrial farming and an industrial approach to farming, thinking, okay, let's analyze the soil, let's get those chemical components down, let's invent fertilizer that'll make sure that the chemical components are evened out in the right way, and let's figure out a way to pack as many plants as close together as possible and get the maximum yield. If they had allowed that to happen in this area, we wouldn't have cliff tea as we know it today, period. In this a special area, and Winter Hot Springs comes from this special area. If that had been transformed and you tried to do this, it would have been a fail. If anywhere else in the world they had said, we're going to do industrial cliff tea, we're going to get that price right on down there, make it available to everybody, that would have been a fail. Cannot do it. This is the interaction of tea bushes with other local plants, in some cases side by side. It's also the interaction with the insects. It's also the cultural interaction. This processing methodology was developed right here. There is a history from generation to generation to generation as the craft is passed on. And even as they modernize the farms, and make no mistake, they are modernizing these farms. And what do I mean modernizing? Are they, trying to squeeze the plants together? No. What I really mean, not so much the farms, but the processing equipment. And the processing equipment I'm talking about isn't the humans who still go up and pick the leaves. They're not modernizing those. They're modernizing the actual equipment to roll, to fry, to bake. So does this mean that every single farmer is modernizing that? Answer would be no. Most of them are doing a portion of the crop with some modernized machinery. But for insiders, they're still doing it by hand. They're still doing it the old craft way, which takes a long time, which takes lots of physical space, takes lots of people to keep track and sort everything by hand. It's very expensive. So why do they continue this with this craft? Because the flavor of the end result can't be changed. It's unbelievable. And that's unbelievable in a great way. It's totally unique. So that's what these next 3 weeks are going to be about. They're going to be about craftsmanship, a unique way of visualizing how to take a tea leaf from a plant and create a flavor that is unmatched in any other style. This is going to be a fun journey. So I said that this journey, to some degree, especially the cliff tea portion of it, started in the late 1500s. How did this occur? Was this one morning a farmer wakes up and says, okay, I've been growing, and my family's been growing green tea all these years. I'm sorry, that isn't what the farmer would have thought. They would have thought, I've been growing tea all these years. I've been processing it as green tea, and I had a dream last night. And in this dream came to me the steps to create cliff tea. Ah, what a great apocryphal story. So the answer is no. That is not how this came about. However, there is an important historical element which created the conditions for this. The Wuyi Mountains were one of the only places where Buddhists, Confucianists, and Taoists lived in harmony. Almost every other place where you had them side by side, strife and contention, but not here. The beauty of the environment somehow got everybody to cooperate and get along. So how did that benefit? That benefited because Taoists were experimenting with plants. Buddhists, especially the monks from the various temples around China, were experimenting with the processing methodology. And because Buddhists were traveling from temple to temple, experiments, or the results of experiments, were becoming known, especially in the Buddhist and the Taoist community, because the Taoist monks were also traveling. And as they cross-pollinated with their experiments, there arose this new methodology on how to process tea. And this is how the cliff tea methodology came into being. So green tea, when we think about it, it's pretty simple. You as fast as possible, try to stop oxidation, prevent oxidation. How do you do that? By applying heat. It has to be 150 degrees or more, and usually they'd apply very high heat. So you stop that oxidation. Maybe when you're stopping the oxidation, usually via a walk, a very hot walk. If it's just buds, you're shaping. If it's not just buds, then afterwards you might shape the tea. And then as a last step, you're going to reduce the moisture so that it's down to 5 or 6%. So basically a one-day process, 2 at tops, to get through all the tea that you pick. It's processed. They usually wouldn't put it on the market on day 3, but it'd be on that market within that first month. This process, done at the fully handcrafted level, it's 26 to 30 steps. Oh no, that's a long time, or it sounds like a long time to me. Wait a minute. I just brought up time. Let's talk about time compared to the green tea. I said at tops, by day 3, you can drink that stuff. So for the cliff tea, the least amount of time before you can drink it, the least, and this is if you're a bad farmer, you're a lazy farmer, and you're trying to skip steps and try and get that tea all done, 3 months. If you are fully into handcrafting and fully into the process, it takes 6 to 7 months to fully, at the highest levels, handcraft this. And usually, by the way, when it's finished, day 1, you can't drink it. I mean, the farmers drink a little bit to make sure that they're on track. But you and I would have a hard time because that minerality, which is the hallmark, by the way, of the Wuyi Mountains, because it's volcanic soil, so there's minerality, intensity of minerality in many of the cliff teas. That minerality would normally be too strong for most people to tolerate. So it usually doesn't even go on the market until the following year. That's traditionally. These years, you can actually get it in October and November in some places. We always get ours end of September into October. And we don't wait. We just put it on or introduce you to the teas as they come off essentially as they are ready. So think about that. They go from this very short process to this very complex process. An ordinary farmer whose only job was to farm tea would never have done this. It's the influence of the Buddhists and the Taoists together as they created this whole processing methodology. And by the way, did this methodology at this complexity spread anywhere else? The answer is no. It's that complex. Now, the bones of the methodology, in other words, the framework of it, spread to other places. But I guarantee you, nobody's doing 3, 4, 5, 6 months. In southern Fujian, where they do the light oolongs, or in Taiwan, or in Canton, where they do Wulongs, they're taking no more than a month. So it's a very, very different methodology. And now you know why the name cliff tea is important, because it's tied to this methodology. That's why you can't go down to Anxi, which is southern Fujian. Hey, how are your cliff teas going today? Even though they're being done in the mountains, you just can't see them. So it's A, methodology, it's B, terroir. Let's think about that terroir. What is it again about the terroir that makes this so special? Volcanic mountains. 36 mountains in the Wuyi Mountains is actually more than 36 mountains, but this area where they grow tea, 36 mountains. And they're all volcanic, growing on the sides, growing on top, growing in the valleys, growing among other plants. My goodness, it sounds confusing. That confusion is the magic, isn't it? Because as you taste this stuff, you'll understand why that's the magic. All right, so I've given you a little history. So start in the 1500s. I've given you a little geography. Yeah, we're in a World Heritage Site. Very little, if any, pollution. I've told you about the cultural terroir, Buddhist and Taoist. And it's come to a more modern version of cliff teas. So over the years, you've had very famous writers in China write about the cliff teas, and some have alluded to 1,400 varietals. Some have alluded to 800 varietals. You get numbers all over the place. In fact, as short a time ago as World War II, a famous tea writer, scientist in China wrote more than 800 varietals in the Wuyi Mountains. So I'm confused. I only have 127 or 150 here. Maybe I haven't done such a good job. But no, that's not the issue. The issue is to date, because it's really hard, because again, it's a protected site, it's wild in nature, and you have wild tea varieties springing up all the time. Now, you'll also have organized varieties. You know, rather than talk about the wild stuff, because that's just harder to control, and I already have hinted why. Let's talk about the very organized stuff, and let's see if we have more control there. You know, I like control, because then we can classify things and know exactly what we're getting, I think. So let's talk about current classifications. So you have scarlet robe. Scarlet robe stands as one of the 5 main classifications. Unfortunately for us, we will rarely get anything except a scarlet robe that isn't a one plant tea. So in the past, and it's important to understand this distinction, because some people will claim that they're giving you the real scarlet robe. Oh my goodness. If they're giving you the real scarlet robe, they better be giving you the real scarlet robe price, because single unblended scarlet robe, that's like $100,000 a pound, because there are so few scarlet robe plants. So most scarlet robe is a blend, and that's okay. But that's also because it's so historically famous, it stands above as a varietal. You have 4 or 5 others that stand as classifications of cliff teas. Now, let's pick one that some of you have come in here and said, oh yeah, I want a rogue weight. And the belief is that once you utter those magic Chinese words, then the real stuff appears in your cup. I am sorry to have to take this beautiful picture and change it completely. And the reason you have to change it completely is because there are many, many places where roquefort is grown. In the mountain, half in the mountain, around the mountain, down in the plains away from the mountain. And then they have this category, heaven forbid, outside the mountain. Now, if anybody says, hey, I have some outside the mountain stuff I want to sell you. If you have an enemy and want to give them something bad, you buy a little of that and you give it to your enemy. Outside the mountain is unrecognizable in terms of roquefort, and it's not good. It is too far away from the original terroir. Remember, I said this terroir is characterized by volcanism in the soil. That's really important. Oh, I've left something out. The second important thing is, if you as a family of tea growers don't have generations of lineage, are you going to know how to really bring out the flavor? Answer is no. This isn't like going to Betty Crocker cooking school, where you get the recipe, you know, a teaspoon of this, tablespoon of that, 400 degrees for this amount of time. No. The complexity of understanding the craft is incredible. So let's talk about some of the complexity. Let's just talk about the plant. If it's growing on the north face of a mountain, farmer already knows, okay, that's going to have one sort of characteristic. If it's growing on an east face, farmer's going to know, yeah, usually another characteristic, because that's driven by several things. The 170 or so days of fall that hang in the mountains. The occasional cold snaps that occur in winter in the mountains. All of these things are important. Also, and you know, most tea purveyors won't let you know that bugs really play a key role in cliff teas. Farmers love it when the harvest comes in, and I'm really talking about farmer producers, because they're thinking from a production standpoint. When it comes in and there's lots of bug bites on the leaves. Why? That means that the crop is coming in healthy. And healthy means you're going to have a better flavor. And there hasn't been oddities in the weather patterns. They like seeing that. It also starts the oxidation process early. Now, let's talk about oxidation a minute. If I lose self-control and am still talking about it 3 minutes later, make sure you send in a message. You're still talking about this thing and you're in science I don't understand. Simply put, think of a banana. You peel the banana and the insides of the banana are exposed to oxygen. Oh, and then it turns colors. Oh, and flavors change. Tea leaves, exactly the same. Well, that would be false, isn't it? Tea leaf, the principle is exactly the same. Inside is exposed to oxygen, color changes, becomes reddish, and the flavor profile changes. And it changes in the direction that's going to make a really good cliff tea. Now, don't get this confused with a completely different process and a completely different tea name called Eastern Beauty. Because Eastern Beauty is an oolong tea that's very famous, and they talk about, oh yeah, this is the one where the bugs bite the leaves. Oh, well, that's not quite true, is it? Bugs will not discriminate. Give me good leaves is the bug motto, and I will bite it. I will eat it. Okay, I can already tell that people are thirsty. Oh my gosh, they're really thirsty. Tea Master was signaling me for the last 10 minutes. All right, so for those of you who are first timers, Tea Master is going to demonstrate the brewing, and then after that, you'll brew along with her. So the first part is a demonstration. So it gives me great pleasure to bring Biju, Tea Master.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, so we do Oolong tea, huh? So look at my, I miss my, the village in, the Wuyi Mountains in Fujian province in China. This is the similar, even if I use large, but I told you, it's still same. Look, similar, right? Yeah. But it just says it's okay. John, can you help me?
Yeah, so what she's pointing out is they use clay pots in the Wuyi Mountains. They usually use small ones and small cups. And obviously the magic of what we've done here is to use large pots. But this brewing technique is very important. You notice it's covered. Whether you are doing a clay pot or a ceramic pot, it's covered. And by the way, again, for those of you who got on a little late, the instructions that I sent out, the brewing instructions that I sent out the first time were correct for indulgence, but they were not correct for what we're doing today, which is winter hot springs. So I sent new brewing instructions at 9:26 this morning. So that's what we're going to use.
This is same small size, but movement is same, okay?
Yeah, so she's kind of opening the pot, kaihu, and what that really means is making sure that there's no leaves left in there from previous brewings, to heat the pot, because remembering that oolong teas like heat in the processing, or not in the processing, the brewing. And that's why these Ishin pots are so good. And you notice that there's different times depending on whether you're using clay or ceramics. Ceramics produces a version of this that's a little bit different, not quite as bright, but it's still doable and it's still recognizable as a cliff tea. You really can't pull this off with glass. Glass is so flat, it just doesn't give the tea justice. All right, so the grammage we sent you was the 5 grams, and whether you're using a ceramic cup with a lid, and you're not brewing yet, by the way, you're watching, or a ceramic pot with a lid, or a Ishin pot with a lid, it's 5 grams, heated. Shake the pot, trying to wake up the leaves. Smell good?
Good.
Smells good, good. And you're going to use 200-degree water. And then you're going to set your timer for the winter hot springs timing, which I sent to you as 2 minutes and 50 seconds. And that's for an Ishin pot.
This same, even
Same
size,
style.
same, same.
Yes.
Yeah.
So using a kettle with a spout that you can control where you pour is the objective. But listen, these are details. And if you don't have this equipment, don't fret over it. You're still going to get a very wonderful and unique flavor. All right, and I've set the timer. Yes, indeed, I have. And now the pot does the work. So part of what I'm trying to convey, not only is the processing unique, the brewing is also unique. And if you're not following some semblance of these instructions, you're not going to get the maximal flavor. And that's really important because this flavor is so unique. All right, so let's go back out to the Wuyi Mountains, out to the fields. We're talking about the farmers. We're talking about the lineage. We're talking about the accumulation of knowledge over the years. It's not only knowledge about the physical terroir, it's also knowledge of how to combine what you're seeing in the physical terroir with how to actually handle the leaves. And so Wulong teas in general are semi-oxidized. So that what that really means is that they're oxidized anywhere from 40 to not 40, but more in with the cliff teas, it's 40 to about 80%. All oolongs, it goes from about 10 to 80%. And the cliff teas in particular have roasts that are very distinctive to them. You know, it's a badly produced cliff tea if every single varietal that you taste just tastes roasty. That's bad. That means that the farmer doesn't really know how to bring out the flavors. And there's subtleties in how you bring out the flavors. Remember, there's 26 to 30 steps. And by the way, this isn't something that, step 11. Oh, I forgot to do step 8. Okay, that's okay. I'm gonna make up with it for an extra fancy step 12. No, you're not. You're gonna throw away or certainly not produce a cliff tea. The steps are there for a reason. And especially the early steps, you can't leave out. Among the 26 to 30, you can leave out some of the later steps. You can do 1 less roasting or 2 less roastings, depending on the varietal. There's all sorts of things as you get further in the process that you can do a little bit differently, but you can't leave out big steps. Timer went off. Tea master, not in a hurry, very steadily. We're in tea rhythm now. We're pouring a Sophie's cup of tea. As you know, in this shop, a Sophie's cup of tea, right to the brim. Now, don't do this at home. Leave a little space. So this is a 200-degree steeping. 200 degrees is hot. 212 is boiling. So you're only 12 degrees away from boiling. So this is very hot. So instead of, unlike a green where you do it at 170 or 175, and you can take actually a little sip without burning your tongue, this is a 200-degree, not sip, it's inhalation. And oh, by the way, especially for first timers, should I be blowing on this so I can cool it down? The answer is absolutely not. That is a rookie mistake. And in China, if you did that among the tea elite, everybody would be having to control themselves from bursting out laughing, because that's a big mistake. And it's a mistake because what you're trying to do is actually appreciate the fullness of this tea. What does that mean? Aroma and taste. They're linked together. And if you're blowing the aroma away and you're trying to taste, do you get a full experience? Obviously not. So I'm going to take, by the way, I'm entering the quality arena. And for those of you who are first timers, the quality arena is a judgment area. So when you take that first sip, you're making a judgment about astringency. Where is it in the mouth? If it's not astringent, it's probably not tea. All tea, because of the polyphenols, has some sense of astringency. The second thing you're doing is you're thinking about aftertaste as you swallow. What kind of aftertaste? Is it strong? Is it light? Thirdly, you're thinking about energetics. What are energetics? Quite simply put, it's how you feel as you're drinking the tea. Are you warm? Are you calm? Are you feeling soothed? Are you cold? All of these would be correct energetic descriptors. Then you're going to take a second sip and verify that what you believe by the first sip is in place. And then secondly, to start to think about, well, what is this aroma? And what is this flavor? And cliff teas, of all the teas, give you the biggest surprises. You get a whole continuum of flavor. Unlike some teas, think about omnipresent for a minute. You get that nice floral at the start, in the middle, and at the end. And by the way, you usually consume it within 60 seconds. This, because of the heat, you're not going to be able to consume this in any less than 5 to 10 to 15 minutes. And as you do, the flavor profile seems to change. I ask you this, is it actually changing? Well, yes, it is actually changing a bit, but as it cools down, you get the liquid over more of your taste buds. So that's why it seems to be tasting. All right, let's go ahead and do the 200-degree inhalation. Okay, so I'm already getting a sense of astringency, and I'm getting where it is on my tongue. By the way, I'm not going to tell you, you're going to tell me. And I get a little aftertaste with it. Too soon for me to tell you anything about energetics yet, but I'm going to take a second inhalation here. And this time I'm thinking both about aroma and flavor and verifying the astringency. And the other thing, particularly with cliff teas, is I'm thinking about minerality and what degree of minerality. And some people, instead of using the word minerality, use earthiness. The reason I don't use earthiness is because when you think of a fermented tea, fully fermented, that's plenty loamy, earthy. I mean, you can taste soil. Here, it's not about tasting soil. It's about tasting rock, that minerality. I'm going to sneak one more inhalation in. And then it's your turn to brew. So again, noticing that Tea Master has a rhythm for doing this, not in a hurry. First step, making sure that the pot is absolutely clean. And by the way, these Asian pots, you can do both cold water or hot water to wash them out. And from time to time, we use both. And she's getting her bag, she's actually drying her 200-degree water. And you should be getting out your bag number 1 labeled Winter Hot Spring. And you notice she applies this heated water both to the outside and the inside. This is a case where hotter is better. Usually with all the other teas, we tell you the exact opposite. Hotter isn't better. Fermented teas being an exception. Hotter can be better for those, but it's not necessary. For this, it's really necessary to bring out the full flavor of these.
But hotter up to the max of 200 degrees, not above, right?
Oh, yes. Great question. What if I can get my water boiling at 400 degrees? Would that be better? And the answer is no, it would be a lot worse. So it's up to 200 degrees. Leaves are in the pot, whatever you're using, or mug, whatever you're using.
Oh,
It's hot on the outside, hot on the inside.
你告诉我，我们虽然大考一直没离开功夫，
So we really haven't left the principles of Kung Fu tea, even though we're using large as opposed to a small cup. we still honor those principles. And you should too, as you develop your practice. And by the way, these are tea toys, you know, mythical creature which protects the tea tableau, one of the immortals.
You can see. It's beautiful.
Yeah, sitting in
Small
a
frog.
beautiful
Inside.
pond. And again, adding the 200-degree water. Not in a hurry, just slow and steady. Cover, set your timer, and get started. So we've talked a little bit about the location. We've talked a little bit about the lineage of farmers and why it is so specific to this tea. There's so many steps that if you can't be, for example, a farmer from Yunnan who does red tea or even poorer tea, and then come up here and think, oh yeah, I know how to do tea. I'm gonna do this. And no, you will not do this. You won't do it in a way that honors the plants. So how many varietals are there? The real answer is nobody knows. It's probably less than 800, which was written about during World War II. But the exact number, unknown. They basically break it down to you have something called qijun, which is something like wild varietals. That's literally strange varietals. And so in the mountains themselves, you have some varietals that are only one bush or two bushes. And remember, I said you have the vegetable varietals, which grow all over the place, almost like a weed. And so this is the characteristic of this particular terroir. And when you go to this place, those of you who've been with us to the Wuyi Mountains know it's a magic place. Just the way the fog hangs over it, just the way as you're walking along or between the mountains, it just has this feel of not really farms, but kind of just a magical place. And that's part of the magic. The other part is, again, all these steps that they take. So we'll go through the steps in great detail next week, because I want everybody to be on the same page. And if I start on the steps right now, we won't be done by 12 o'clock. That's how many steps there are. And that's how well I want to give you. That's what I want to leave you with, a thorough understanding of the steps. Yes.
Participant shares the tea released a chocolate scent after it came into contact with the heated clay pot.
Tea released a chocolate scent after it came into contact with the pot. This is a great comment. Typically, you're going to get things like either chocolate or floral or sweet or caramel with cliff teas. And a cliff tea like this does have that hint of chocolate with the warm leaves. And it's interesting because, and again, yours should look like this in terms of color. And it is interesting because nothing is wrong, by the way, unless you say garlic. If you say the word garlic to me at any point during this evaluation stage, I'm going to have to use the word that's wrong. Almost everything else is that's right. And particularly the chocolate, that scent of the warm leaves with the chocolate. So great catch on that. So go ahead and enter the quality arena. And for those of you who are doing cliff teas for the first time, you ever had anything that even approximates this? And remembering that you're not in a hurry. This tea doesn't allow you to be in a hurry. It's got its own rhythm, and it's up to you to match that rhythm. And in this area, they talk about rock rhyme, rock rhythm. And at first, if you're reading a translation or a tea purveyor is saying to you, oh, do you catch that rock rhythm? You know, you're thinking to yourself, I don't hear any Mick Jagger. Where's the Jimi Hendrix? That's not what they're referring to. They're referring to the rocks, and really, they're referring to the minerality. Now, next week, I am again going to really focus on this term rock rhythm, because there are some very specific things you can say about that. But I don't want to wander down that road quite yet until I go through processing and then tell you what some good ways to think about rock rhythm. But that's at least our rock rhyme. And again, there's many different ways you can translate that. Some say cliff rhythm, but I like rock. So for the first timers, as you're going through this, one of the things I hope you're doing is taking some notes, because we have 3 consecutive weeks. So you'll be able to compare your notes each week to what you had the previous week. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, once you get to flavor evaluation, I want you to take notes about that too, because all the flavors of this are different. And by using the right rhythm and by using tea rhythm overall, this gives you a chance to really penetrate and detect those different flavors. Yes.
I love this tea. It starts out warm and welcoming, and as you swallow, you're left with a cooling sensation in your mouth, even as you feel the warm liquid move through your body.
This commentator loves the tea, the warm, welcoming sense of this tea. There's a coolingness as an aftertaste that this particular commentator gets. Great comment. It's definitely a warming, friendly type of tea. Yes.
There is a sweetness in the aroma that is a mix of dried fruit, caramel, and with a hint of butter, with a balance of a roastiness.
Sweetness in the aroma. A hint of caramel,
dried fruit,
butter. And by the way, we're going to come back to that butter. And a roastiness, all combined, all balanced. So why am I coming back to the butter? I actually love the fact you included that in here, because what that says, not only is it about scent, but also about a smoothness, as if you put a little pat of butter. Well, that's a little ridiculous, but you get where I'm going with that. It's that creaminess. That's where I'm going. The creaminess that is unexpected. So as you're tasting, I will continue to talk, thinking about the processing for a minute. There are virtually no processing plants in the Wuyi Mountains. They're all a little bit on the outside. And again, that's to protect the environment. So you think about when they pick these bushes, and actually in some cases they are trees, small trees. And then they've got to get that stuff walked out of the mountains. So they have stations in the mountains, and the workers carry that down for, I think those stations, the distance between those stations are about a mile or two until, and then they switch, much like the Pony Express here. You know, you ride to an outpost, you get cargo there, and then you rest, and fresh horses and fresh crew take it. Well, this is exactly how this tea is transported out of the heart of the Wuyi Mountains. They really are serious about protecting this area, and I think it's a good practice. The other great practice about this area is the farmers themselves, in conjunction with the local government, decided, and this was years ago, no pesticides at all in this area. And they've really stuck with that. Oh, and by the way, it's only one harvest a year. So it's a late spring pick. This isn't an early spring pick, although in some parts of the mountain, they'll pick earlier. They'll pick as early March in some parts of the mountain. But generally, they're picking at the end of March, and they pick all the way through about April 22nd, April 23rd. And every day's pick that comes in is quick processed. And by quick, I mean within 24 hours. Not quick if you're having to stand around and actually do it or watch it. But, and then to stabilize the leaves. Once they stabilize the leaves, those batches, they label, and then they put them on shelves, and they don't return to fully process or start the process of fully processing for a month, because it takes that long to get the stuff all in, all labeled, have to have a little bit of a rest, and then come back and start the roasting process. And again, I'm going ahead of myself a little bit. Next week, we'll talk in great detail about that roasting process, and we'll talk about the handcrafted versus the machine roasting, because they're doing both things, and they're learning, they're still improving their craft. As how do I want to say this? As the machines modernize, they're modernizing more quickly than the farmer can get you, especially handcrafted farmers, can get used to using them, because they have a goal to still produce an incredible flavor. And really, the machinery is supposed to be making it faster and cheaper to do that. They're not trying to have shortcuts on the flavor. Most of the farmers, yes.
The color and clarity of this tea is amazing. I'm not an artist, but I'd like to paint with it.
Color and clarity. I love, love, love that you chose to comment about clarity, because when we talk about rock rind next week, part of the description is the tea liquid clarity. Part of the understanding of that rock rind, of the things that you use to evaluate, is this stuff any good? Clarity is one of the standards. Can you imagine if this were all milky? You'd have milky Wulong. Oh, that's not true. That is a false statement. But the point being that for cliff teas, that clarity is very important. Great catch on that. All right. I'm going to give you about 60 more seconds, I think, because I think I'm running out of time. Oh, right on time. To kind of think about any other comments that you might want to make. And I'll let you know again, we actually are going to do indulgence next week. And the instructions for indulgence are, in fact, different. So be on the lookout for that. But the generalized methodology is going to be the same. We're going to focus in great detail on two things. And that is the actual production of these teas, because it's one thing to tell you, oh, it's 26 to 30 steps. And it's another thing to take you step by step by step. You will be totally blown away. And it will amplify that thought of how in the world did they decide to do all of these steps and come up with this unique product, something which at this shop, and by the way, let's get one thing out of the way. I love all my tea children, so, and I love them equally. But this one, I especially love equally. Is that correct?
As any good parent would put it.
Exactly, exactly. All right, so we've come to the end of today's session. Your commentary has been outstanding. I'm really, both Bijou and I are really happy that we're going through this, because especially at the start of the year, to get an indication of how complicated the process of tea can be. And then you'll notice all these other methodologies of tea, and you'll think back to this one, because this one is so totally unique. All right, you have responsibilities this week. For those of you who are newcomers, you didn't realize you were going to have homework. Here's the homework. The homework is this week, stay especially vigilant and healthy. And I'll see you next week when we do indulgence. Bye-bye now.
Take care, everybody.